Even if there's a small chance, we owe this to everyone who's not in this room to try.
We will. Whatever it takes.
22 films, 11 years, 3 hours, and a whole bunch of busted bladders. I'm Geoff Arbuckle. This is Film Seizure at the Movies, and this time I am talking about perhaps the most anticipated film of all time, Avengers Endgame from Marvel Studios, the second Marvel movie of this year out of 3. And before we get into my non-spoiler review, I just want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. You can catch new episodes of the podcast Film Seizure each and every Wednesday with myself and Jason Oliver. There we typically talk about about slightly older movies that mean a little bit more to us in a nostalgic way, or possibly just something that we always just kind of grew up with or always kind of liked. Every Monday, you can hear me talk about monster movies. I cover lots of things from various different eras and different decades. That's Monster Mondays each and every Monday afternoon. You can also listen to episodes of Film Seizure on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. We upload stuff to YouTube, just our episodes. If that's where you like to go and listen to stuff, you can go there and get episodes of the podcast there. And there are some episodes on TuneIn as well. But let's talk about, as I said, perhaps one of the most anticipated films of all time, Avengers Endgame, 3 hours of superhero goodness from Marvel Studios. First and foremost, let's kind of back up a year to Avengers Infinity War, where we kind of ended on a very sad note where the Avengers lost, the Mad Titan Thanos won, and wiped out half of all living life in the universe. And all not just sentient life like humans and various other sentient life, but also all animal life. So this movie picks up pretty close to about 3 weeks since the what they call the snap, or what some people like to call the snapping. But basically, the Avengers, what's left of them, are reeling, and we just kind of start understanding more of what their plan is and what to do next. The thing is that there is a little bit of a time jump in this movie, so we do get to see what their immediate aftermath is, and then basically the world as it moves on from half of the population disappearing. So, and this movie is really, I think, really well paced in the sense that it sets up the emotional impact of what happened at the end of the last movie, and the first several minutes or so kind of deal with trying to figure out, what do we do next? How do we get this back, and how can we ultimately save those people who aren't here? And there's a great deal of emotional impact in that first, probably half an hour, 45 minutes or so. Also, a vast majority of the trailers and the various clips that have been released for this movie take place in that first part. They really do save a bunch from, so that, or at least from 2/3 or the latter 2/3 of the movie. They really do save a bunch of that. I mean, they had to show some of the stuff with the big climax, but they were able to primarily use the marketing to, and as they've said for the last month or so, really just kind of keep it to that very beginning part of the movie. The movie does really kind of ultimately become a little bit of a drama for a little while, or at times a little bit of a comedy. After the time jump, we kind of get to see, well, what's going on now with these characters. What are their struggles? What's their lives like? Various characters take things in very different ways. Some of the characters take things in a very amusing direction. What's interesting, though, is that once they kind of settle into the new reality of what's happened, there is a little bit of a separation of the Avengers. They each kind of go off and do their own thing, and it's very interesting to see them handling the various pressures, the various defeat, or the feelings of defeat, their really kind of their emotional journey. When you get into the final act, I mean, and this movie is really kind of handled in, the final act is about an hour, and it really kind of gets to, the action stuff, the stuff that you come to see. But in the meantime, what's really interesting about this movie that really should pretty much always act as this kind of action, we've lost, but now we're going to fight our way back and win the day and do it for everybody that we lost. What we ultimately see in this is really kind of more of a character study. And that's kind of surprising whenever multiple heroes have kind of come together into one movie. It's usually been mostly action, a little bit in character, of course, a little bit in drama, of course, but mostly it's mostly action. And this time around, we bring all of these characters together. A vast majority of the main cast of this movie are the original Avengers, and it really kind of delves into the way they deal with what's happened, how they've dealt with the past several years, and the ultimate defeat that they faced. And that really kind of makes this a very different Marvel movie and kind of a special one. I don't know what any reviews have said, but what I can say is that I can definitely understand if some people don't particularly care for some of the lighter tone stuff that happens in the middle of the movie. But for me, I kind of appreciated it because it really, what are you going to do once you lose? Once you've done this thing with the superhero team, a team that should be undefeatable, has for the most part been undefeatable, even though they had their issues. How do they deal with that aftermath? And that's kind of an interesting take that they do in this movie. But don't get me wrong, when it gets to the action stuff and when it gets to the stuff that is what you expect from a superhero movie, it absolutely just blows it out of the water. So to kind of get to some of my praise for the movie, I don't really have much to say negative. I was not... I wasn't pained by the 3-hour runtime. There's a story to tell here, and it is a culmination of 21 movies plus a culmination of the rest of the story that they have to tell with this 20-second movie. So it's an appropriate time frame. I don't really think that there's much that they really could have cut out. So I don't really have a great deal negative to say, at least out of the gate. This film is really for the fans. People who have gone to see all of these movies over the last 11 years. This is really for us. And it's for people who enjoyed even half of those movies. The nature of the story gives the ability to revisit some of the things that happened in other movies. It revisits some of the character moments. It revisits some of the action bits. It revisits some things, and it gives us something that, and it also is very good at giving us what we haven't yet seen. And that's, it's, you think about it, it's like, how does Marvel keep doing this? How do they keep making billion-dollar movies? And I know that even before I even laid my eyes on this movie, it had already made $169 million worldwide. That's insane. How do they keep doing it? How do they keep finding something that people come back for? Because you can always have the people out there that say, "Oh, well, it's just popcorn trash and it's really easily consumable." But it's really kind of more than that. It is pop culture. It is a popcorn movie, but it rides that very fine line of it remaining to be something that the culture as a whole, and really, as it turns out, maybe the world as a whole, can be entertained by. And somehow they do it time and time again, even to the point when I look back on Captain Marvel and I say, it's a pretty good middle of the road Marvel movie. There's some better and there's some not as good. And it's still a phenomenal movie. It's still a movie that was really pretty fun to watch. So, how do they do that? How do they know what the formula is and what it is that we haven't seen yet? And what are some of the things that we know, the comic book fans know, but haven't seen yet? And they just know how to play their cards right. The Russo brothers, who directed not only this, but also 2 of the 3 Captain America movies and Infinity War as well, they just know how to do this. They just know how to make these movies and make them. I mean, when I say that they make art with these movies, I'm not trying to say that this is like Citizen Kane or anything like that. It's pop culture art. It's the art that we hold comic books up to. Certainly, you can say that various artists that have worked in the comic book medium, various books that have been written about various creators, or looking at their body of work as a whole, can be deemed as art. And these movies have been able to not only tap into what makes cinema fun, but it also taps into why so many people grew up reading comic books or were fascinated by comic book characters, whether it be from movies or cartoons or what have you. What's funny is there were some people in that crowd that grew up with these movies, literally grew up with this series. There were people in that crowd that were in their early 20s or maybe late teen years that started watching these movies like Iron Man and the first Captain America and the first Thor movie and so forth. And they were watching those as kids, and they stuck with them. And even much like comic books did, particularly Marvel comics, they grew up with the audience, and it continued to raise the stakes, and it continues to pay off. And Endgame is 100% the culmination of that. What happens from here is going to be something new. Maybe there are going to be some slip-ups. I mean, some people would argue that some of the Marvel movies that came out over the last 11 years were slip-ups. There are debates on whether or not Iron Man 3 is any good, or whether or not the Thor movies really belong, or whether or not the third Thor movie was too lighthearted, and so on and so forth. So there are debates like that, but generally, as a consensus, most people would say the 22 Marvel movies that made up this first 11 years of their studio are of a quality that is hard to really kind of compare against anything other than maybe the original Star Wars trilogy. So, I mean, Endgame is the perfect tip of the hat, is the perfect culmination. How does it compare to Infinity War? I don't know. Infinity War was my number 1 movie of 2018. If you listen to Film Seizure's year in review a couple months back, it finished number 1 for me. I knew it the moment I saw it that there was not going to be a better movie in 2018. I came out of this movie saying, I don't know how this can be topped. I mean, yes, I'm sure there are going to be more artistic movies that come out. Like, as much as I did like Black Panther, I can't honestly say that it really deserved to be Best Picture. I can't really honestly say that there isn't another movie out there that on some sort of artistic level, particularly when it was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars and so forth, I couldn't see it winning. But that being said, of the movies that I go see, the movies that I will shell out a lot of dollars to go see, whether it's at a movie theater or renting it at the end of the year or whatever the case may be, I don't know how this movie can be topped. It gave me a feeling that, I said this back when I reviewed Shazam earlier in the month, a few weeks ago, and I can say it again here. I was giddy watching this movie. A friend of mine sitting next to me, there was a particular moment that was the perfect culmination of my fandom, particularly what I grew up loving from Marvel Comics when I was a kid and what I love today. There's a moment that basically I was both a 10-year-old version of myself and a 42-year-old version of myself sitting there in the same space, having the same emotion, having the same delight that almost brought tears to my eyes. This is a very special movie for people who have loved these movies or have loved these characters, whether you never read a comic book but only saw the movies, or if you grew up reading the comic books and for the most part enjoyed the movie. This movie is for you. And it's something that's, I mean, I don't know. It's probably going to be the quickest movie to ever make $1 billion worldwide. It's hard to imagine that it won't be a significant moneymaker domestically. I mean, right now, Black Panther is the number one Marvel movie domestically. I can't imagine that this won't be by the end of its run. It's a wonderful movie. I mean, not to be no pun intended, but it's a marvelous movie. It's from minute 1 to minute 182. I was enjoying and grinning through the whole thing. That's not to say that there aren't some significant moments that, I mean, this is a culmination, so keep that in mind that, there are going to be certain goodbyes in this movie. There are going to be certain, understanding that the Avengers that we've been watching for the last 8 years or 7 years since their first appearance isn't going to be the next team of Avengers that we see later. If there is another Avengers, I don't know. So understand that this is also a conclusion. This isn't just setting up the next movie. This is a conclusion. What comes next is going to be different and new. And it's going to, for the 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old kids that go see the next movie, it's going to start another cycle for them. And that it's going to be a good ride. It's going to be a fun ride. I mean, if this is your type of movie and you need to see it, you need to see it. The sooner the better. Get your butt in the movie seat, or in the movie theater, see it on the big screen, enjoy it. I didn't see it in 3D or at IMAX or anything like that, so I can't really speak to what that experience is like. All I can say is from the experience that I had, it was just a beautiful culmination and a beautiful graduation of these first 11 years of Marvel movies, and to many, many more years going forward. And I'm sure I'm sure they've already got some ideas of where to go next. So we'll have to see. Does this end up finishing first? Right now, I can't imagine I like a movie more than this at the end of the year. How does it compare to Infinity War or to some of the other Marvel movies that I love? I don't know. I'll see it a few more times. this movie comes from a different place than where Infinity War or Civil War or Winter Soldier was coming from. So I'm still going to have to let it compare. It's near the top. I can tell you that. It's one of the very best Marvel movies. It's going to be hard to continue to keep up this level of quality that they've built over these 22 films. Thank you for listening. You can catch new episodes of Film Seizure every Wednesday. We've got a new episode coming out this upcoming Wednesday. We've got one that just came out a couple of days ago, which is Killer Force. If you have been a listener of the series, you know that we love movies that have force in the title. This one turned out to be a little bit different than what we were hoping. Next week, we have the 1981 film Excalibur, something I grew up with. Certainly a fantastic example of what fantasy films were before the superhero craze came along. Then we've got Monster Mondays every Monday. That's with me. This upcoming Monday is Return of Swamp Thing, which is kind of a fun little movie, but very different than the original and very different than what we're about to get on that streaming DC app thing. So check those out. Again, you can get those at filmseizure.com each Wednesday for the regular episodes of Film Seizure and Monday for Monster Mondays. We do these Film Seizure at the movies every now and then. So just be on the lookout for those. You can listen to our episodes on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. We even upload the episodes to YouTube. And there are some episodes there on TuneIn that you can listen to as well. But thanks again for listening. And until next time, enjoy Avengers Endgame and Avengers Assemble.
I like this one.